for those on the phone who can't see, hello, it's obviously Claire here. We've got a few new people actually from the team. So we've got Lee here. Oh, are you recording? Yeah, so we're recording this. So if anyone has any problems, let us know, but we can pass it on to the other champions after. So this is obviously because come out of kind of feedback from the first workshop that it'll be really good to kind of go over the technical side of things and see if you have any questions, and we can talk about standards and everything. So to get us started, we've got on the line here, we've got Lee Dodds, who's presenting this for us. He's a key member of the ODI and the OpenActive team. He's the Data Infrastructure Program Lead. We also got Nick Evans, who I'm sure you've heard or if not met before, our Technical Engagement Lead on the OpenActive program, and myself, and then a couple of champions on the line. We've also got, oops, I've lost it, there we go, Phil. Oh, hi Shirley, just joined us. So we've got Rachel, Gemma and Shirley on the line, and Phil, who is working on the OpenActive things behind the scenes, so he's also listening in today. And I'm sure a couple more people might join as we go along. So I will pass over to Lee now to take a lead. We're going to kind of go through standards and all things technical, and then there'll be a question and answer session at the end. Over to you, Lee. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Claire. So I promised that this was going to be a non-technical introduction to the technical side of OpenActive, so I'm going to keep it quite high level and give you a kind of introduction to what standards are, what we're standardizing in OpenActive, and the progress that we've made so far. So to do that, I've got some slides which I will talk you through. So I've just started to share my screen, so hopefully you can see the first slide okay. Somebody shout if you're not seeing the slides. Right, so yeah, so the agenda. I'm going to try and answer a couple of high-level questions, just give you a bit of an insight into what the technical work involves. And then if we've got time at the end, then we can have a bit of discussion, and you can raise any questions that you have, things I haven't covered. So I kind of didn't want to make any assumptions about people's background, so I thought I might just start off by talking about what standards are and why they are useful, just to kind of help set the scene a little bit. So pretty much everything that we interact with on our daily lives is standardized in some way. We just probably don't realize it. So the cables that you plug into your laptop, the sockets that you plug your laptop into in the wall, the road signs that you kind of see when you're driving down the road, all of those things are standardized by different groups. Some standards are defined by national bodies. So in the UK, we've got the British Standards Institute, but other standards are built by community groups and programs like OpenActive. So what standards help us do is to design, build, and use things in consistent ways. So ignoring all of the technical sides of what a standard is, it's essentially just a documented, reusable agreement about how we're going to do something. Now, in OpenActive, we are building open standards. When we talk about open standards, we're using the word open in two slightly different ways. So the first way that we're using it is an open standard is published under an open license, which means that anyone can access and use and share the documentation. So it's freely accessible. You don't have to pay a license fee to read the documentation. You don't have to pay a license fee to use that standard to build a system or to use it to create an application. So it's completely open for reuse. The other sense that we use the word open in is that there are different ways to build standards. And in OpenActive and the work we do at the ODI, we try to build standards using open processes. So what we mean by that is we make the process of coming to an agreement about how we're going to standardize something, so standardize how we're going to publish some data or design a system. We do that in ways that allows anyone to contribute. So all of the discussions that we have around what the standard might involve is open and accessible for everyone. We use online collaboration tools to support that discussion. and we document what we've decided as we go, so that the community has opportunities to get involved to help shape the standard so that it works for everyone. If we didn't do that, then we'd be basically just making decisions on behalf of the community and then imposing a standard, which won't work. Standards are always better if you've got multiple perspectives, multiple people help you come to an agreement about what's the most useful thing to standardize. So in OpenActive, we're creating open standards for data. So that means standards that help us to publish, access, share, and use better quality data. So we need open standards for data whenever we want to consistently collect data, or to share it between different organizations, or also to help us make sure that we are interpreting data in consistent ways. Without that, we would be struggling to deal with many different data formats and different data models that are based on decisions that people have made about how to build their own systems. And what we're trying to move towards is a world where the community has come to some agreement about the best way to publish and structure data so it can be useful for as many people as possible. So when we are creating standards, there's lots of things that we can try and agree on. Even setting aside all of the technical side, all the technical types of agreement we have to come to, we have to agree on like definitions of words. What do we mean by a session or an event? What do we mean by a physical activity? So that we can be making sure that we're referring to those things in a consistent way, so that we know that the data that we're collecting and sharing can be consistently used across different systems. We often need to use standard file formats, data models and schemas to help us structure data. We need codes of practice so that we know that we're publishing data in ethical ways, so that we're not including people's personal data without their permission, for example. And we often need kind of standard taxonomies or categories that help us organize some of our information. So things like standard lists of activities. The process of developing standards, different communities and different standards bodies go through it in slightly different ways, but there's a set of common steps involved through the process of building a standard. So we have to come to some early agreement about what the scope of the standard is for, what kind of things are we going to try and standardize. So we have to think about what kind of data that it is that we want to share within the program across organizations. Then there's the actual kind of, with all the hard work of coming to agreement, doing the development of the standard. So writing all of the technical documentation, having all the debates and discussions to help us align our terminology so that we are coming to a kind of consistent agreement and a consistent view on what's the best way in order to share some data. And that's the bit that we try and do in the open. So for OpenActive, we have calls like this every fortnight, where we get people from across the technical community together to discuss progress on the standards, to dig into some of these more kind of technical topics, and kind of give everybody a chance to check in. But there's other ways to contribute as well. So we have a mailing list where we share out updates to the specifications, pose questions to the community so that we can get different feedback and encourage everyone to express their viewpoint. And we have a kind of a big log of issues that we need to work on, the areas where we've identified we need to do further work. Then we need to think about how we get people to use the standard. So it's not enough just to kind of write some technical documentation and hope that somebody's going to use it. They need help and support in order to do that. So, you know, the end goal isn't the creation of a standard. The end goal is to help people publish and use data in consistent ways. So if we don't put enough effort into the adoption, then we won't achieve that goal. And then this is an iterative process. You have to start with a clear scope, and then over time you identify that there are changes needed to the standard. Perhaps there's new types of data that need to be published, or through use, you realize that there needs to be some more work done to improve how certain types of data are being published or described. So there's a kind of constant review and iteration. And again, we try and do that with the community in an open way. So that's what standards are, and that's the kind of a bit of a kind of view into what standards development involves. So what are we actually standardizing as part of OpenActive? Well, there's a few different things that we're working on. The first is creating a standard to describe opportunity data. So how do we consistently describe sessions, events, facilities, organizers, and a whole range of different information in a way that reflects the needs of a variety of different data publishers and data users. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but opportunity data is not personal data or commercially sensitive data. It's about how to find a squash court. It's about what yoga classes are running today or in a week's time, where you can go to take part in a running group. The opportunity data doesn't cover information about the participants, so nothing about the people who are organizing and running the sessions or who might be participating, and none of the commercially sensitive information about who participated in the past. You know, it's just the information that would be routinely shared on the web, be published. All we're doing is agreeing a common way to organize that data and to publish it under an open license. That means anyone can use it. So that's the kind of core building block of what we're trying to do. As part of doing that work, there are some specific other things that we need to agree on. One of the main things that we'll be producing is a standardized activity list. So we know that many different systems have different ways of organizing and describing activities. If we want innovators to be able to use the opportunity data to help people find opportunities to be active, then we need to be able to consistently categorize and describe what kinds of activities they'll be taking part in, because that'll help drive those kind of discovery tools. So we're trying to come to some agreement around what those activities are, how to group them, and how they relate to one another. But it's not enough to just agree on a kind of consistent view of the world. We need to make sure that we're agreeing on ways to publish data as well, so that innovators can actually access the data and start to do useful and interesting things with it. So we're agreeing technical specifications that will help a variety of different platforms publish data in consistent ways. And that's really important because there are so many different organizations that have got opportunity data that for an innovator to try and go around all of them and deal with all of their varied ways of describing opportunity data and the different kind of APIs and technical mechanisms they have to publish data, that it would be quite a lot of work to do that. So by standardizing not just the data model, but also how to access the data, we make life easier for everybody. Beyond that, we also have to think about how we turn opportunities into participation. So once somebody has found an event, a session that they want to take part in, we need to be able to give them the ability to book a place to take part in that activity. So we're creating standards that will allow applications to place bookings on behalf of users in the platform that was publishing the data. So that involves agreeing on a whole variety of different things, like how to publish pricing information and current availability, so people know that, you know, how much it will cost to attend a session. Agreeing how to share that information across platforms, how and when payment is taken, how a user gets get confirmation that they've got a place at the end of that process. So if you think, we've all been through kind of online commerce systems, booking a cinema ticket, for example. With the booking standard, we're kind of defining what happens behind the scenes as you book that kind of ticket, book a place to attend an event. So those are the kind of key things we've been working on. So how far have we got? What progress have we made so far? So we've been working on this for quite a while. It can take quite a while to get agreement between everybody to, on consistent ways to publish and describe data. That's not a reflection on the OpenActive community. That's just a reflection on in any kind of standardization work, it takes time to get people to agree on consistent approaches. So we published the first version, the first 1.0 version of the specifications last year. So that was the opportunity data model and the standards to support publishing. Since then, we've been working on updates to those specifications. So been reviewing them, extending them to take on new requirements, some of which are coming from new publishers who are starting to publish data as part of the program. So they have a need to publish different types of data. So one of the key things we've been discussing in the last couple of months is how to describe facilities so that people can book squash courts and not just a yoga class. We also have taken into account feedback from people who have been exploring the data, so some of the early adopters, and looking at ways to improve the quality and consistency of the data that's been published so far. So as part of the early work on the program, we wanted to make sure that everyone could publish data. So it was allowing people just to publish what they have. And then the strategy is over time to improve the kind of consistency and quality. And that's easier to do once we've got a clearer view of what kinds of data people have and where there might be differing quality. So for example, just to give a small example, in some platforms, there will be quite detailed information about where you would go to take part in an activity. So it would have both the address, but also the geographic coordinates of say the leisure centre, so that you could quickly display a Google map or similar route for somebody so they can find their way there. But in other platforms, they may only be capturing just the address information, or even just the name of the leisure centre or location. So now that people are publishing that data, we can look at the variety of data that people have and start to give some feedback and guidance about how to improve that quality so that we can get more impact from the data that is published. We're currently in the process of developing the booking API standards. So there's been quite an intensive period of work on that over the last couple of months. We've been doing some work to kind of pull together an early draft of what that agreement might look like. And there's been a number of implementers across the community who have been have been implementing those standards. So both from the point of view of a platform that will allow somebody to place bookings, but also on application developers who will be building that functionality into their mobile or web applications. And one of the reasons we're doing that is booking is quite a complex process, and we thought the best way to approach it would be to do some experiments, get people to prototype and explore the early draft that we were making, and then we could use that to better inform decisions about how we improve the design of the standards as we move forward. So that's kind of one of the kind of key new deliverables that we'll have. We've done some work on trying to standardize activity lists, but it's still at a very early stage. We've encouraged a variety of different platforms and providers to share the lists that they have So we can start to see about the kind of common approaches that people are taking to organize and describe activities. We've done some work to look at alignment between those lists and kind of standardize how to represent them. But the process of actually agreeing what should be on the list and how they should be organized still needs further work. And that's something that we'll be picking up over the coming months. I think that's somewhere where we could certainly welcome some additional input and suggestions from across the community. So if you're interested in keeping an eye on the activity that we're doing within the kind of standards and tools track, then there's a couple of places you can do that. So I'm trying to publish blog posts on the main OpenActive website as we hit key milestones in the standards work, so you can kind of check in there. But all of the actual coordination work we're doing as part of a World Wide Web Consortium community group. So they provide a forum for organizations and initiatives like the ODI and OpenActive to come together and work on standards in an open way. So there's a web link on the slide at the moment. You can go there and you can see lists of all of the specifications that we've been producing, get an idea about which ones have been finalized and which are still in work in process, and links to the mailing list and other documentation that we have. So if you're interested in dipping in a bit further than what I'll cover today, then that's one place to go to. The other starting point, which is probably slightly more interesting, is to look at our data dashboard. So if you go to status.openactive.io, then you can see a list of all of the publishers, all of the data sets that have been published as part of the program so far. And what we're doing behind the scenes to generate this dashboard is we are looking at the data that people are publishing and checking to see whether it conforms to the standards that we've published. So we can get a sense of how well we're doing in getting the standards adopted by different organizations. So you can see on the screen there, say take the first example, Active Newham, their data API is up and running, it's got a tick. In the second column, we've confirmed that they're using the standard API to publish data. In the third column, we've got a tick that shows that it uses the standard data model. And also, we've started to look at what kind of data people are including. So we can see that in this case, they've got geographic coordinates. So there's a bit more data there that might help somebody actually find an event. I haven't shown it on the screenshot, but if you click on the summary links, the view button, then you can get a very brief rundown of the kinds of things that are in the data set. So it gives you a list of the top 10 activities that are mentioned in that data feed, and also which local authorities are mentioned or referenced in that feed. So you can get a sense of the kind of geographic coverage of the opportunities that that provider is making available. As you can see, there are some crosses against some of these. So not everyone has yet adopted all of the standards, and that's part of the technical engagement work that Nick is leading. We're trying to find ways to offer support and guidance to help people adopt the standard. So over time, we expect to see that list grow and more of the crosses disappear, and again, many more ticks. If you click through to from one of those links, you'll end up at a dataset page. So every publisher has one of these pages, which is the kind of entry point for their data. There's a few common elements to each of these pages. They're all branded slightly differently, but the common things are, there's a link here to the actual data feed. There's a link through to where you can go to ask questions and some documentation, but also it clearly displays the open license so that a developer can be confident that the data that they're accessing is available for them to access, use and share in however they see fit. If you click through to the feeds, then you'll get some data. I'm not going to talk, I promised it wasn't going to be a technical talk, so I'm not going to go into that, but that's how a developer would find the data that they need. And because it's organized in standard ways, then they can very quickly start to build applications against it. So that was my kind of brief presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides there. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anything that you want me to go back over or to cover in a bit more detail?
Hi, Lee, it's Rachel from Active Norfolk.
Hello.
Oh. To use this. Is that working?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, so what would be really useful is to understand in terms of our role where we can help with this process. So for example, if I had a leisure centre or something and we wanted them to open up their data, what would be the steps that we would do, and what would be the steps that you guys would help with?
I'm going to let Nick field that question because...
Okay.
So there's maybe a diagram that would be useful that we haven't got, but we should probably make, is an influence diagram to show you the kind of that there's like different. I'll do it with my hand.
She's on the phone though.
You can't see it, can you?
No.
You're on the phone. Are you on the phone, Rachel?
Yeah.
No, I can see you.
Hey, okay, great. So you can see mine. I'm going to make a diagram.
Rock on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All tech. So these are three things that, and basically how it works is that this little finger, this little finger here is I'll do it like down here. So that this little finger here is your contract manager, right? That's the local authority.
Mm-hmm.
So they are the ones that have the contract with the local authority. With the leisure operator or the trust. Leisure operator and trust is here. They will use a booking system, so they have a booking system in-house, which is here, and they use that booking system for everything they do. And now that booking system that they have purchased has like a bunch of technology and stuff that sits behind it, which is over here, and that's where the standards need to live. And so basically, what you're doing by influencing here is is saying we need the standards to be implemented. That goes into the contract with leisure operators. Leisure operator goes, okay, we need the standard to be implemented. That goes into the contract with the booking system. Booking system goes, we should implement the standards. And then that's where, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's where the
okay.
magic happens. So Lee's...
So So basically our role is presenting the opportunity and explaining that these standards are out there and that like trying to get them to agree to prioritize them and feed it down the chain, and then we can kind of step back from it a little bit and hopefully that'll take it.
That's right. So we've got little handy bit of wording that I know Claire might be circulating or has circulated for contracts, which includes a link which is kind of /standards that goes to a page which points at the various specifications these kind of talk about. And so you basically can put that wording in to say, you know, the details here, but basically, can you do this, please? And then if that link gets passed down the chain to the people on the ground, then they do the implementation.
Right.
And just, it's probably worth saying that of all the work we've done to date, we've not had any instance where someone on this side, like a booking system, just for the heck of it, has gone, you know what we're going to do? We're going to implement the standards today because we've got nothing else to do. That's never happened. And even when we thought that they would do it, we've waited a year or even a year and a half in some cases, and they haven't in the end done it because they've got other things that keep coming up their list as being more important, because their customers, these guys, are requesting stuff from them, which is more important. And so what we've learned is the only way to have this work and grow OpenActive overall is to influence and to have the customers of the booking system say, we want this. And then amazingly, you know, they move within weeks, usually.
I think the ability to be able to also point to the fact that other people have been able to successfully use the standards can help reduce kind of pushback that something might be technically difficult to achieve, because you can clearly see that other people have been able to successfully share their opportunity data in ways that that we've agreed, within the community. Do we have any other questions?
Just a quick, another one, sorry. What, is that all right?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, if they already are conforming to the standards, will the opportunity data just be available for a provider in our area, or do they have to agree to share it from their system?
Yeah, so it goes back the other way. So as soon as this guy, I hope this guy make it, as soon as this guy implements the standards, actually there's like a tick box in their booking system that they need to then have the customer in the middle tick to make it available. So then you need to make sure that everyone, so for example, if there's a Legend booking system, which is in use in some places, then as soon as Legend implement, which they're doing at the moment, the specification, the next thing will be to go to all the Legend customers and say, hey, have you noticed that there's a tick box in your system you can tick? If you tick it, then all these wonderful things happen. You should probably tick it. And it's free to tick. You just need to know that it's there and understand what it means. And yeah.
Hi, it's Gemma from Sussex. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long does the process take with those that don't have maybe a bigger LMS system like Legend or Gladstone to obviously standardise their system to obviously go through that process?
Are you thinking of small providers when you?
Yes, yeah.
So kind of an NGB or a club or a smaller leisure?
Well, we've got smaller leisure operators in our patch. So some of them obviously don't use the bigger kind of systems, and also we do have some clubs that kind of run their facilities as well that have smaller systems.
So just for the leisure operators, first of all, do you know which systems you're thinking of?
Not off the top of my head. I think well, I know that Wave use something, but it's not. I can't remember what it is, but I know that they use a smaller system.
Scuba, Delta, or XN or Gladstone.
They use two systems. They don't use Gladstone. I think they might use Scuba, and they use something else which I've never heard of before.
Force Pro?
No.
Okay. So
go through all of them.
That's okay. Well, I guess what we'd be really interesting to know if there is another, because that market's pretty well kind of sewn up by a very small number of organizations, which is quite handy for this. So if there are others, then that's something we should definitely let us know. And we can look for other customers of theirs. So the way it works is, you find the booking system that you want to see if you can help them make it open, to help them prioritize it, find other customers of theirs. That usually takes a few months to get all the customers to say, yes, we want to do this and understand constantly what that's about. And then the next step after you've got the customer saying we want this is it needs to go into the roadmap of the booking system to actually schedule the work to be done. And again, that can take months. Sometimes it can take weeks, depending on the customers you've got engaged. If they're bigger customers of the booking systems, you can see even a massive company like Legend can move pretty quickly if the bigger customers are asking for that work. But then again, you're talking still about months probably. And then the actual implementation itself, when the schedule is ready to, when they're ready to actually do the work, can be quite quick. So for small booking systems, it's 3-4 days of work. For larger booking systems, it can be a few weeks. But as you can see from those timescales, the main time is finding the customers, getting the things scheduled in based on the customer demand, and actually then doing the work is really small amount of time at the end. And obviously we're here to support and make sure that small amount of time is as efficient for them as possible. but the other stuff is where that's the bit that we can all work together on to try and shrink.
Okay. No, that's great. So yeah, it'd be minimal, so their impact they would get back quite quickly because it wouldn't take that long to implement it. Okay, so that's great. Thank you. I just had one other question as well. I do a lot of work with disability organisations, and one of the things that they say is lacking in most activity finders is around transport routes to activities. So it might have the address, but what it doesn't tell you is if it's near a train station or a bus route. Is that something that is being picked up as a standard as well within, obviously, the work that they're doing around the address information? Because I think in terms of the work I'm doing, that would make a massive difference to making opportunities more accessible.
So there are already some open data sets that provide information on location of kind of bus stops and transport routes. There's some that comes from UK government, and there's some that comes from projects like OpenStreetMap, which is a kind of collaboratively edited map of the world. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing in the program is signposting to other relevant related data sets that can complement the data that we're standardizing in OpenActive. So we're trying to focus our work on the opportunity data and making sure that that address information is in there, and then that will allow innovators to combine that with other sources to kind of create that kind of routing and kind of wayfinding service in a richer way. I mean, another example is there's open data around green spaces, for example, in the UK. So we're kind of signposting out to that. So we're kind of piggybacking off open data and other standardization work happening in other communities rather than trying to do everything ourselves.
Mm-hmm. No, that sounds great.
That's probably
Can I just pick up on what Gemma was saying as well, in terms of is there going to be included in the standards some kind of more target demographic work in terms of like what if something is a disability specific kind of activity or is in over 65s, that kind of thing? Is that something we've accounted for at this time?
So we have had some discussions on that already, and there is some, I'm going to call it provisional support for that kind of information in the first version of the standard to indicate kind of accessibility information for a venue or for an event, and what kind of support there is available for people with disabilities. But that's one of the areas of the standardization work where often we're running ahead of what the platforms are actually routinely collecting. So some systems will have this in quite detailed and well-structured ways, and in others it will just be it might just be a bit of just kind of descriptive text that is associated with the event. So that means that we kind of have to go with the kind of lowest common denominator to start with, but then try and use the standards as a way to nudge people to improve the quality and detail of the data that they're collecting over time. We've got exactly the same issue with age ranges, for example. So within the standard at the moment, you can indicate what age range an activity might be suitable for. But as soon as you look at all of the data across the different publishers, everyone has a different view of the world when it comes to age ranges, which makes it difficult, can make it difficult for someone who's consuming the data to be able to consistently find events that are suitable for a specific age range. You know, say people, children under 13, for example. You know, one platform might use that, another platform might use 10 to 18. You know, it's quite varied. So that's kind of part of the ongoing revisions that we'll have to make, not just to the standard, but really about people's platforms to kind of encourage a kind of better approach to this data, so we can create more kind of inclusive events. Do we have any other questions?
Sorry, Rach, I muted you there, but please feel free to. So there was some background noise. I was going to say on that same topic actually that the disability support stuff is we've been working with the I keep getting the EDFS, one of those, get the acronym wrong, to kind of just get that right. But it seems like a really, really complicated problem to describe that. And Lee's mention of provisional support is right. I think the challenge we've got is a lot of the bigger providers of data don't really have the expertise in-house to know how to categorize that information. And so there's a little bit of education that needs to happen with those providers. And I think probably back to that whole like influence chain, I think it's probably the same here in that if we can persuade them to prioritize that and thinking about that categorization. So I was in OpenActive yesterday, they've got 180 sites and they've got hundreds of thousands of activities across those sites. And going through and categorizing those for age range is something they're doing, but it's a big bit of work. And prioritizing doing that for disability support is difficult because they don't even have the information. Kind of, it's easy to tell that a kid's class is whatever age it is because that's what it's advertised as. But for some of this other stuff, they just don't have that data in-house. And so if this is something we want to see happen, in the same way as we're influencing other things, we need to be influencing them. That's something for all these good reasons that we want to see made available and have them prioritize that through the contracts and other things. And hopefully over time that will then create it. But I think that with all of these things, the standard isn't the way that we're going to get the data out. The standard is a good start for the conversation of what it needs to look like. But the way to get the data available is through the influence.
Anyone else have any questions?
Journey, did you have any?
No, I've not got any questions.
Okay, great. Well, unless there's anything else that we want to cover, then I guess we can wrap up the call. If you have other questions for me, Nick, or Claire, then you can get in touch with us through Claire. Happily answer more questions about the standards work or any kind of additional technical detail. We're here to help and support you. And thanks for coming along.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.